Hello, welcome to our podcast series, Paths to Governance, where we'll be lifting the lid on all areas of school management. I'm Sujal Zaveri and I manage Governor Clerking and Governor Services here at Enfield Council. In each episode, I'll be talking to people who are involved in school governance, exploring why they joined us, and delving into the key themes and issues that we grapple with each day. Today, we're going back to basics. We'll be exploring what it means to be a governor, what it involves, why it's such an important role, and what motivates people to do it. I'm delighted to say that joining me today is Lucy Nutt, who's Head of School Improvement in Enfield Council. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you.
Thank you, and it's great to have you here. Now, without further ado, let's move on to the questions. You've got many roles and you've had many roles in education. So how did you experience governance through these?
I think as I've progressed into different roles, I've begun to really understand the importance of governance. One of the things I've learned doing school improvement, when we go into a school that's in trouble in some way, 9 times out of 10, there is a problem with governance. And I'm not saying that the governors are bad people or the head's a bad person, but the relationship isn't right or the roles and responsibilities haven't been properly understood. And so I see the role of the governing board as being the people that really help keep the school on the right track, which is why when we work with the school that we categorise in Enfield to amber or red, we set up a group that governors sit on so that they are seeing the model of the questions that we ask and how we're working with the school, because it's helping governors to understand their role as much as it is improving the school. Because once we've gone, the governors are the people that are in the school far more than we are, and they're the ones that can really help and make a difference for the head. In schools that aren't in trouble, I think that governors are really critical, because one of the things that happens when you become a head teacher is it's a whole new job. You're a teacher, and I think you need to be, perhaps, to be a head teacher. I know there are models where sometimes they've tried to do different things, but I think on the whole, it seems to work really well when you're a teacher that steps into that role. But you're suddenly doing a job that's about finance, that's about health and safety, that's about HR, that's about safeguarding in a different way. And I think that's where a governing board can really come into its own, because they can have expertise about premises, finance, whatever it is. And again, that really helps, particularly a new head, keep themselves on track. So one of the things that I think is crucial to keeping our schools with the Ofsted gradings of good across the board, if we're no longer having that one-word judgment, is actually the role that governors can play. And of course, governors have to get the right level of challenge and support. And I think that can be sometimes quite an art. And, well, you will know in your role that sometimes you get called in when that balance isn't quite there. And I think for new governors, also understanding that they're not operational, I think that can be one of the things. But so I think governance is an absolutely crucial part of school improvement and keeping schools to be at least good in all the areas that Ofsted grades.
Thank you, Lucy. And tell us a bit about your role as a governor. So it's really valuable for the place, the organisation where you are a governor with your wealth of experience.
Yes, actually it's quite interesting, because I sometimes have to sit in a governing board meeting and remind myself that I'm there as a governor. I'm not there as school improvement. And that, I think, has been very good for me in seeing how an effective governing board works. And I think, unsurprisingly, where I'm a governor, I chair what they call the Quality Committee, which is the Standards Committee or the Assessment or the Curriculum Committee. I'm aware different schools call that different things. And of course, I'm then able to bring in quite a high level of understanding of the data, which perhaps some other governors don't have. It is actually a special school. So even though I'm well versed in data, it does look different in our school. And it is a school that children do take GCSEs, they do sit SATs, it's all through. But you have to look at the progress, you have to look at the context in a very different way. So I think I'm able to bring some knowledge and skill to the governing board, but I then have to remember that I'm not the school improvement partner and that I'm asking questions as a governor. And I sometimes ask questions so that other governors understand what they've seen. And I think I've seen that with skilled governors elsewhere, that they ask enabling questions. When I was a head teacher, often my deputy would ask a question they knew the answer to, so everyone else then understood it. So I've seen that governance has really helped move on that school. When I became a governor, the school wasn't in the best place. And I think the head teacher found the governing board meetings really useful because it was a way of acknowledging the progress and how hard people were working and what had moved forward, whilst also recognising that there was more to be done. And actually, sometimes the head teacher would bring things to the governing board and we would be bouncing ideas. We now have one day a year, we go and we do a strategy day. And we have documents and we have what comes from the trust board and we have what comes from the school. And we then work on our own governance action plan and how we can add value to all of those things. But that means that as governors, we're really aware of both the pressures and the challenge and the support that the school needs. And I guess if I'm going to be flippant, perhaps the most important job we do is we give them all chocolate at Christmas.
But you make a very important point that it's really valuable for the head teachers to get acknowledgement of all their successes. So as well as the challenge, it's great to have that support for them. So tell me, and what has been the most rewarding part? It's obviously a huge part of your life.
Yes, it's quite difficult, and maybe it's a little bit sad because, I actually read Ofsted reports from schools that I've got nothing to do with. I was going to say for fun, but it's not quite for fun. It's about me skilling myself up for my job, understanding support and challenge for schools, also being able to read school reports from Enfield or where I'm a governor really well. And so it's difficult to know whether I get more excited by one of my schools in Enfield getting at least good, and look, they got outstanding here, or when that happened for the school where I'm a governor. And I was so nervous when my own school had Ofsted. And there I am, I'm the person that suggests questions, that trains governors, and I was really nervous. And I was just so thrilled when, they didn't get outstanding overall, they got good overall, but there was some outstanding aspects. And of course, now we've moved away from the one-word judgment. I think getting those outstanding aspects is even more noticeable. So it's when you get that acknowledgement, I think, and probably I'm more excited by that than your average governor. But I also think it's when you go to the events and see the children and young people that we serve. Last Friday, I saw the Right to Speak with Enfield young people and what they were doing with poetry and spoken word, and their confidence and their understanding of issues in Black History Month was phenomenal. When I went to where I'm a governor and I saw our achievement evening and we had parents, one poor woman who got up to speak and promptly burst into tears because she said, I just never imagined my son would finish school. I never imagined he'd actually have GCSEs and now be going on to do A-levels. And when you see, there's the global impact, reading the Ofsted reports, woohoo. And then you actually see it personalised to those children that we're serving, and you see what a difference can be made. So it's difficult to say there's one particular thing, but it's those moments. It's seeing what the music service do in Enfield with young people. And I know you always have the music service at the governor conferences, and it's reminding ourselves that that's what this is about. All of our strategic thinking actually comes down to what happens for that child, that young person in the school where you're a governor. And I think that's something that you kind of can never lose sight of and probably never get enough of when you see it.
So that's really touching. The overall impact of governance and seeing the impact on individual children or a group of children must be great. And I can really see the passion coming through there. So thank you for that. Is it possible, do you think, to have a good school without good governance?
Well, I sort of touched on that when I said about working in school improvement. I think it possibly is. I have come across the odd governing board where the head teacher was perhaps better than the governing board. And you realise how good the head was and thought, well, if they'd had a better governing board, the school would just be phenomenal. So yes, I think it possibly is, but I think having seen, I'm thinking of a school I once went into very early on in a job, and the chair of governors, that there'd been all sorts of very sad things that had happened, and basically a deputy head had come in, and literally the second day of her job, she was suddenly acting head. And the chair of governors was in about 3 times a week, and the governing board were meeting together weekly. And that enabled a very able woman, but she was stepping up to be a deputy, she wasn't really a head. That enabled the school to be secure until another arrangement could come in. And when you see that kind of impact that a governing board, and particularly that chair of governors, could have to support that school, you just think, well, if it's a good school with not great governance, what could happen if you put that great governance in? And I think that's actually a critical thing, because in a way, this is going to sound heretical, if a school is in a really bad way, it's almost easy to have good impact because you kind of know what you've got to do. You'll have the support from the local authority via the additional support, via the rapid improvement group, whatever it is. When your school is good and wanting to do even better, that's a hard job, because you've done a lot of the things, you've got a lot of things in place. So serving your community and persuading smaller groups of children to do even better, having impact on certain groups, getting different families in. I think it is possible to be a good school, but just think what they could do if they had great governance.
One of the issues that people who are considering being a governor seem to have is the impact on their day job and how their managers are going to respond to this. So have you, as a manager yourself, have you got any words of wisdom that you could give managers who's...
I think that managers should see a member of staff becoming a governor as something that is really helpful for their own organisation, because you have someone who has to learn how to think strategically, has to start thinking about how they ask a question in a supportive and challenging way, learns new skills around people management, learns new things about different areas, because not every governor is going to be a finance person, but they will learn about finance, even if they're not on the financial committee. Not every person will be good at data, but they'll learn to interrogate data. So they're going to learn some transferable skills that are to the benefit of that manager. And I know if an organisation is big enough, they will give them a certain number of days for corporate social responsibility. And they should see that as a benefit to the corporation, which is why they give those days. First Direct have always really pushed school governance, and they see it as a benefit and a way of actually getting their staff trained up to do more and be better team players and to be better in their role. I know in a smaller organisation that's difficult, but you're still in a smaller organisation getting the benefit of that person's training and thinking and knowledge of what's on offer in the locality, and knowledge of what's happening, and knowledge of what's coming through from schools, which is going to benefit their organisation and their firm and their company. So I would say that managers should really think about what the benefits are to their organisation. They can then stop and think about what the benefits are for all of the young people coming through.
Thank you, Lucy. I think that's for any managers who are listening. I hope you took that into account and make sure that you think about the corporate responsibility and the difference you will make, and the difference, the skills that and your employees will make when they adopt these skills. So I think that is a good point for us to draw this to a conclusion. And you can find out more about being a governor by visiting the Enfield Council website. An enormous thank you to Lucy for being with us today. I really enjoyed talking to you, Lucy, and listeners, thank you for listening. If you'd like to listen to our next podcast, do so. The next podcast is going to be with our governance professionals or clerks. Thank you.